Very good afternoon, Stats Race Lens users. Welcome to Kentucky Downs, and just about 17 minutes from the Old Friends Stakes, race 9 at Kentucky Downs today, day 2 of the meet. Yesterday, of course, the season got kicked off after the cancellation from Saturday. Day 3, we'll look forward to Saturday's action, including a terrific stake sequence, a little bit of Louisiana Downs thrown in for a good measure, the newly turfed Super Derby. And we're going to have a fun hour plus with you, Craig Walker, on hand, as well as Ellis, Starr. And we'll start the conversation off with a big hello. Craig?
Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
Excellent. Still doing a little bit of afternoon napping post Saratoga, trying to catch up on the 7 weeks of full throttle action. And Ellis, Starr, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Steve. Hello, Race Lens users and prospective users. Glad you're here. And I recognize what you're saying about Saratoga, but there's no rest for the weary here. I can't resist these almost 12-horse fields in every race at Kentucky Downs, so I'm still on overdrive. But with the cancellation, it's really interesting that we have these cards on Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and then next Thursday. So there'll be some sleep to be had starting next week.
Before we get into anything involving the races, I would love for both of you to talk about your approach. And Ellis, I want you to start and talk about this unique facility, this countryside course that is the most European of race ovals that we've got in North America, with an undulating course, an uphill stretch. There's a lot of unique features, and some people that are only look at it, obviously these 5 or 6 opportunities typically the last several years, it can be a little intimidating. You mentioned the big field sizes. There's a lot of unusual things that are involved when you tackle Kentucky Downs.
No question about it. And it's funny, I tweeted yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but I always tell people that the course is shaped like a carabiner. Some people call it a D-ring. And I actually found a picture of a carabiner and a picture of the course. I put them side by side, and I was even amazed how close they looked. So not only is the course shaped interesting because there is a right-hand turn and then a huge sweeping turn, and there's ups and downs. I hadn't seen it up close in a couple of years, but we were at the pleasure of being out there yesterday, myself and Rhonda from Equibase, and on the second floor, and actually could see the whole course. And I had forgotten one thing to talk about, that basically from the beginning of the the end of the far turn to the stretch is 5/16 of a mile. And people think about that for a second. I mean, Churchill Downs is long, but this is even longer. And because it's on turf and because it's going uphill, you've got to have a fit horse. So I would just throw out a few basic suggestions. More than anything, you're not going to find a lot. But if you have a horse that's run over the track, take a look at how it ran. Certainly, since they only run the 5 days a year, using Race Lens, you can turn on lifetime PPs and you can see exactly what those races look like and watch the video. You want a horse that's fit. Certainly, you want a horse that's, I'll tell you one thing for sure, in some of these maiden races, first-time starters going a mile or more, I just toss them because they can't possibly be fit. I might get beaten by a couple of them here and there, but I won't bet a horse going first time out, going a mile and a 16th on the grass at Kentucky Downs, because you got to be fit. And, of course, you got to pay attention to jockeys and trainers, because some trainers are much better at training at Kentucky Downs or training for fitness, getting horses prepped for this meet with the kind of purses on there. Maiden races are going for $130,000. You're going to have 6, 7, 8 horses in a field of 12 that are probably have the ability to win.
Should also ask and bring into this where everybody is running, where they're coming from, because certainly day 1 we had Saratoga horses who a lot of people had avoided based on some recent years' performances, and then all the Saratoga horses did was dominate, really, particularly the second half of the card, winning 5 of the 10 races. including I think it was the 5th where they ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you have horses coming from Ellis, from Indiana, from the various tracks in Ohio, Saratoga. You've got them coming from all over, and that can be very difficult and pretty daunting.
Yeah, I think I'll add a rule of thumb, and Craig might interject here. I think based on class, unless it's a stakes race, you really got to take a hard look at horses coming out of Illinois. Ellis Park, you got a lot of horses prepping for the meet at Ellis Park. A lot of the trainers, McPeak and Roman, said so. Ellis Park, you have to move up a peg where you normally might not consider Ellis Park as indicative when they go to Keeneland, for example. Of course, Saratoga, you're going to get that. On the track itself, I thought that's where you're going with tracks. You know, the cancellation Saturday was because they got 7 inches of rain Friday and Saturday from the remnants of hurricane, which was Tropical Storm Harvey. Then it was dry, and they got about 1/10 of an inch of rain on Tuesday night. And so yesterday, the rail was out 30 to 40 feet, depending on what part of the track. And still, if you were inside, you weren't going anywhere. You had to be outside of the track. Today, it's a little different. But still, I will say one thing, and I don't know if this will be the case on Saturday, but I handicapped that way, and I don't know if Craig did as well. But you really don't want horses that are leading in the first half a mile. They just don't seem to have anything left for the last part of the race.
Craig, why don't you include some of your overall thoughts whenever you approach each fall the Kentucky Downs meet?
Yeah, I would say in general, I mean, I try to look for, like Ellis said, trainers who've had success there before or who have strong angles going, because like Ellis said, you need a fit horse. It is a European style undulating track. I also in the sprint races in general, you know, I know Ellis is saying this year because of the wet course, but in general, the horses that go to the lead have trouble winning in the sprints for sure. So if I am playing a horse that's going to be near the lead, I mean, it's the kind of horse that isn't a quitting type, and you know can battle and hang in there. So I'm looking for them to run pretty evenly if they're going to be near the front. And that's kind of the main things overall from year to year that I look at there.
Ellis, you mentioned the trainer angles, and you know we've typically year to year seen 1 or 2 trainers have particularly strong meets, and I can think back a couple of years ago there was a period where Wayne Catalano would show up at Kentucky Downs with live runners. Mike Maker, who particularly has in recent years shown this remarkable ability. We've talked about this before, using angles of stretching horses out on the turf. One of the biggest things that you've got to take into consideration in those maiden races, and because of these big purses, there's a real target on those races from major outfits. But the pedigree portion, how do we approach the pedigrees in here when you're going to see a lot of turf type stallions and potentially horses that have got siblings. You had a debuter just now at a big price for Vicky Oliver, who's a half to Zepessa. And so I was keeping an eye on that one, Vicky T in the 7th race.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got some great pedigrees. And, one thing I would say, especially using Racelands, is you could set, a distance. You could set distances to look at for statistics for sires and dams. And because of the undulating course, for example, and I haven't done this yet, but if you're looking at a maiden race with a lot of first-time starters, and the race, let's just say, is 7 furlongs, I would look for sires and dams and set the distance to turf and a mile or more. I'd add a furlong. And I'd look for horses, at least some semblance of progeny. It doesn't have to win, but that some of their siblings have hit the board, and certainly would be nice if they won, at a distance that's a little longer than what they're running, because that's the equivalent to be even that more fit. We'll talk about a few of these with the stakes. We're not doing any maidens on the show today, but there are some interesting things. And by the way, I will mention I posted on our forum, which everybody should go to, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. I posted on our forum how to take advantage of hot sires by just using the public hot sire listed blood horse and being notified. So you could actually set up an angle for the sires on turf if you can find a list of sires whose progeny, first crop sires particularly, whose progeny are running well on turf. Or you can research the hot sires overall and find them. Because as we move to the fall now, when we got 2-year-olds particularly are going to be running as they were the last couple of days, last weekend, of course, at Saratoga and Del Mar, running in these turf, the 2-year-old turf stakes going for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf and the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Phillies Turf. And pedigree is going to be pretty important.
No doubt. And, Craig, even before we get into the first of Saturday's stakes, which is the ladies' turf, can you show everybody how to adjust those stallion stats?
I think Ellis can do it. Yeah, go ahead, Ellis. You do.
Yeah, I'm just going to use. We're already going to talk about the stakes race, but so I'll just say, for the sake of discussion, if you can get to research opens to summary research, or you can do it from PPs. But I'm just going to use the stake we'll be talking about in a minute here. But if you go to go to the summary research right now, it's set for trainers, but you just switch, for example, to sires, and there are some. It'll come up with whatever the default is, which in this case is going to be 3-year-old females. But if you want to set one, you can use it forever. And I'm just doing this off the cuff. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to individual research. So I'm already on sire. I'm going to open any sire, which takes me to individual research. And I'm going to click on modify. Now, this has the last 5 years of turf route, so it's a great start. And this is for See the Stars. So it's a good example. We talk about a sire that we probably have heard of that we know is good. And in the distance category right here under routes, you could set one for distances. So I'm going to set one right here from 8 furlongs to, let's just say, 12 furlongs, a mile to a mile and a half. And that's really all I'm doing right now. Like, you can go back and you can make it for maidens. You can do other things like that. And if you want to save it, you name it. And I'm going to name it right now. It's going to be sires, mile to mile and a half. And you can name whatever you want. I like to name mine long, so I don't have to go back and remember what the heck I put in there as criteria. And then you click on Save As. If you were to click on Apply, it would just apply it. Now, it's going to start to calculate this in the background. You still have to find that same template. The newest template is going to be at the bottom, so there it is right there. Now I've got a particular horse. If you want to see the entire field, you just click on the Show All button. So I'm doing this rather quickly. And, of course, via the forum, or you can email and ask how we just did this. But now here's a list of the sires in this race, and this is a stake, but pretending it's a maiden, whose sons and daughters have won or run. It's calculating how they've run at a mile to a mile and a half. So you can see, for example, by win percentage, See the Stars, who's mostly European sires, as most people would know, but he's had 11 horses with 40 starts. They've won 10 of 40 from mile to mile and a half in the last 5 years. So if you're seeing a horse by See the Stars that perhaps hasn't run that far or is running at Kentucky Downs, you know you've got a good horse. You can go back and change this and do it maidens. You can do first-time starters, second-time starters. You can have all those pre-saves, and then you can find them really quickly. But that's the power of RaceLens and being able to, within what would take me 10 clicks to set up a research, or call it research. And then if you want, you can make this an angle as well. You can set up an angle for horses by See the Stars when they're running a mile to a mile and a half on the turf, or a mile to a mile and an eighth, and then we also have a mile and an eighth and over. So you could do that, and then you'd get notified and see an angle match every time. So it's pretty powerful.
Well, and this gets into what I've said repeatedly to people that have asked, whether we do it in these discussions or whether people have written me or have said something to me, and a lot of people came up at Saratoga and asked me questions about the product and how I use it. And the thing that to use this as a model, you can find let's say now on the racing calendar, where there's a lot of juvenile runners that are doing things for the first time.
Right.
There's an obvious hint that Orb, that sons and daughters of Orb and of Violence are going to be very good going long on the grass. You can put an alert in for turf routes for Orb and for Violence, and you'll be notified when one runs at Remington. And you may not be a Remington player, but you're going to be alerted to opportunities that are, that are things that you've noticed are happening. And if you get out in front of them, especially when it comes to first crop stallions, you can absolutely slaughter it, and you'll be ahead of everybody. And then, all of a sudden, a turf writer will catch on, or somebody will, put it out there, publicly, and your edge is gone. But if you get an edge, something that you notice, and it doesn't, I'm using this as an example, but this is how you win playing the races, and it's how you win using Stats Race Lens. You're finding things that you can be alerted to, and it's going to do the work for you. It's going to comb the past performances on a daily basis and tell you where your opportunities are running.
Yeah, a quick example. While you were talking, I just switched. I made one for 2-year-olds only for those that could see, and I sorted it in the money percentage. So sons and daughters of Scat Daddy, 2-year-olds, running on the turf from 1 mile to 1.5 miles, which I set up as an angle, are in the money 67% of the time. I think you want to know that if you're playing exactas and trifectas. Wouldn't you agree, Steve and Craig?
Yeah, that's a big number. In fact, there's a piece in the forum about Wesley Ward and some Scat Daddy progeny right on this topic. Actually, it's funny that's so glaring.
Yep. Well, it is. He had one yesterday too. It ran really well with Julio Garcia, his man.
That's right. And an opportunity coming up maybe in the nightcap.
Before we get started, because we are talking about these races coming up the next 2 months, and of course we have Super Saturday and all the press for Breeders' Cup, do you want to mention the specials we have right now, Steve?
Yeah, why not? And this is for potential new customers. If you're tuning in, and if you're listening live or listening to the replay, if you haven't used the Stats Race Lens yet, here's a great opportunity. 2 months free with 1 month purchase, which is obviously a tremendous value, and it is obviously going to take you all through September, October, and into November. You'll have an opportunity to play all the preps leading up to Breeders' Cup, right through Breeders' Cup, and even beyond. You got to do this by the end of this month. Basically, it's 2/3, 60% off of the quarterly subscription. That's less than $1.50 a day. And it gives you all of the advantages, unlimited access to the Equibase PPs and TrackMaster PPs. This is for new customers. You sign up and you use the promo code WEBINAR, WEBINAR, when you check out. And there's so many benefits. Ellis was talking about posting in the forum. Q&A, you'll talk to other users that are experienced. You'll talk to people like Craig and the developers that can answer any internal questions. There's the monthly newsletter about product enhancements and all the great angles. Really, so many benefits. And I'm really pleased. I mentioned how many people said something to me at Saratoga this summer. I really feel good that people were curious, they listened in, and they've tried it. And there is a learning curve. We're not going to pretend that you're going to master this in 10 minutes. Every day I open it, I find something that I've got to poke around with. So there is learning curve, but you got people that'll help you, and it's something that will give you an edge. And everybody is looking for an edge. That's the key to making money at the racetrack, is having information somebody else doesn't have. And let's give you some of that information. We'll talk about the 7th race that kicks off the All-State Pick 4, and it starts with the ladies' turf.
Well, I'll go with this. We'll start here. So I'm gonna just kind of give the 3 horses I think are the top win contenders in terms of probability if I was doing a sheet, and then I'll talk about them, and then Craig will pick over and go over some angles as well. Number 7, Susie B would be my top choice here. We just talked about Maker, who just does very well at the meet. Tyler Gaffalione, I think he won. I know that I played the jockey bet yesterday, so I know he was in the top 3. He had a lot of points. I think he won one of the stakes. This is just a very interesting horse. I'm going to show this video. Of course, anytime you see something you want to look, we all can't remember. I don't have the kind of mind where I remember exactly what happened, but you can look and you can watch this race, and we'll go back and watch the video. Now, 2 things we'll notice here in Susie B's race is, first of all, she's going to be pretty far back. She is in this race, she's the 2 horse, and she's a gray, so you kind of can't miss her. I'm going to skip a little bit here for the beginning. And there's a horse getting away. The fractions are moderate in this race at Gulfstream, which was the Christmas Pass Stakes. And Susie B I'm going to show right here. To make it bigger, but I'd like to leave it small for now because it's just more crisp, even though some computers and sometimes on mine it's really good. But you can see her, and you can't see her in the picture. She's going to sneak up the rail. She's going to get a dream run. There's no question about it. But just the fact that she made up 18 lengths here was pretty impressive. And Tyler Gaffalione, that was the first time he rode her. And the fact he's riding her back, she's just coming into the picture right around here. Here she is, the gray with the white blinkers on. And you'll see a horse pretty much on her own just assert herself. Normally horses can get a little scared in tight tight quarters on the inside, but this filly, or I should say this mare, has no problems taking this hold. Right now she's got an easy hold, but that's going to be a little tight in here, and she's just going to punch right through and go by and win by about a half a length. That was her best effort career-wise in terms of Equibase speed figure. It was a 102. It was a style change from last year. We'll go back to PPs in a second. So she ran in this race last year, and that's something as I mentioned earlier, you want to check to see if they've run at Kentucky down. She's got one race here, and she earned something in that race. So I go back and look where it is here. It was this race last year, and she led in that race. She finished 4th, and as we talked about earlier, horses aren't doing that well on the lead. But she changed her style completely under Tyler last time out. She had been running off the pace a little bit, but this was really the furthest she'd come from behind. And you can see it tied her career, not career best, but tied one of her best Equibase speed figures. She's got a 107 to run back to as well. What's notable here is you'll notice, as I talk about a lot, and I'm sure, Steve, I know you talk about, Craig talks about key races. This italics indicates that the 3rd horse came back to win, but I want to look at the chart and see if there's any others, because this is where you can get information other people don't have or can't get. And we circle next out winners in the chart now, and you'll see the 3rd horse, the 5th horse, and the 6th horse all came back to win their next starts. Now, without going into details, you can look at those, and I'll quick switch over to Bonita. Out of the Susie B race, she won her next start. It was the Panama City Handicap. It was a state-bred stakes at Gulfstream. She ran a little slower, but she did win a stakes, and so did one of the other 2 that came back to win as well. So 3 horses were flattered Susie B by coming back to win. Last of all, we'll talk about this. I'll talk about it a number of times today. We'll get through it quickly. We talk about a trainer who knows how to get his horses fit for this European-style course. Dyke Maker, now this just defaults to the current stats, and I didn't even set up one because it's so easy to change. If you want to see how he's done at the track, all you need to do is go to today's track, and it's already set up for 2 years, but I'm going to go back for the whole 5 years, which is the maximum here, and we're going to look at Maker. And what's great is also we can sort it by year or by wins. And if you sort it by wins, which I'm going to do right here, it subsorts by year. So you can see all these wins going back here. He's 19 for 93, 20% wins, and exactly a 0 ROI at today's track. He's got winners. The last year he won 6 races. The year before he won 6 races, 7, I believe. He's already won 1, so he might get 5 more winners at the meeting, and I'm looking for Susie B. So that's my top pick. I'll quickly go through the 2, and then we'll let Craig have his crack with stuff. My second pick is Linda, the 2 horse. Again, switching over to the 2, Linda. Here she is. She's got 1 win at the track. I want to go back and see what it is. Here it was last year. It was an allowance obstacle clear, but don't forget those are $140,000 purses, a 97 figure. She's got the right style. She rallied from 7th. She ran second to Bewley, if I say it right, or Bewley, in the Indiana General Assembly Stakes with a nice rally, got beat a half a length. Now, she's been rested for 2 months, and if I want to see what Bewley's done since Bewley came back to run in the Violet Stakes, Thomas, and ran evenly. So the fact that Linda is fresh is a plus for me in this case. And, of course, Brian Hernandez, who's won a couple today, I believe, gets along very well with her. You can see Brian Roder here, win, second win, third, fourth, second. So real nice price at 5-1. And then I'll use Bewley as well because even though she did kind of regress off that race, I like this interesting pattern here. She came to the U.S., she won, she ran 4th, she won, she ran 4th. Brendan Walsh is a rock-solid trainer, one of the new great names. Remember that name. You can find him on Twitter, by the way, Bren P. Walsh. You can see here 26% wins in the last 30. He's still under bet. Everything's profitable here. Stakes, turf routes with the jockey in last 30. And he's doing the best he can with a mare that just doesn't seem to hold her form for 2 races. But the plus is she gets Jimmy Graham back, who rode at the win. So those are my picks in the race, 7, 2, and 1. And before I kick it to Craig, I'll say people are asking, what about Miss Temple City? Well, not only do I not want even money in this race, and I love Miss Temple City and I love her connections. They're great people, the Felds. I am concerned that the trip to Ascot still took something out of her that she hasn't recovered from because she had that race at 4-5 against okay horses, Wakila and Warflag, but she had nothing for the drive. And, I'll take a stand that maybe she needs another race. So I'm going with 127 here. And when we get done with this webinar, by the way, we'll post all the picks on the forum. So I'll have an exact as well, but I don't want to go through that now. And I'll kick it off to Craig, and I'll give Craig the screen here so he can show his angles. All right, Craig, it's all yours.
Okay, so I'm not as against Miss Temple City as Ellis is. One thing is, she did. If you do look, she did have the problems at Ascot. That last race was subpar for her, but I mean, her whole career, a lot of times she's run races that are just okay. Like she'll run when you look back in her career, she'll run a race like 102, 109s, but then she'll pop up to a 124 Equibase speed figure, and here she's done it as well. So I'm not as worried about her as Ellis is. For the angles that she has, just to show a couple of the angles, Graham Motion, when he has a horse off between 1 and 2 months, so 31 to 60 days. There's lots of starters, big sample size, wins 20% of the time, and he has a 20% ROI. So that's extremely positive for a well-known trainer to have that simple an angle with that many horses. And also, I just want to show an angle. The other angle is this last race, as Ellis said, was a lower class race. So what we have here in this class speed rating box, the first one is the class rating of the race, and then the other one is the Equibase speed figure that the horse earned. So the last race was a 102, and this race is a 107 class rating. So whenever there's 5 or more points in class rating, the horse is either moving up or down in class, and so that's another Graham Motion, another positive angle of his when he moves a horse up in class based on the class ratings, the Equibase class ratings. He wins 16% of the time, and he has a 37% ROI. So that's also highly positive. So they're just two good factors pointing to this horse. This horse is also the top pick on the true odds. One thing I wanted to show people real quick on the angles. So when we're looking at this angle, these two angles, this means at least one of the angles is positive. So both of these angles for ground motion are positive angles, but only one is highlighted, and the user controls how the highlighting works. So when I click back on this one here, just want to quickly show this so people know that how these work. When you click on manage the search angles, so I'm just using the breadcrumbs there. When this button here that says set highlight thresholds, this is what you click on to control what the highlighting is going to be. So for positive angles, those are the green highlighting, and then negative angles are the red highlighting. So the success score, you know, an okay success score is usually around 5.5 or so, and good success scores tend to be around 7 or higher. And that's all based on an algorithm that the stats team came up with based on win percent, place show percent, the sample size, and the ROI. So for me, I have the ROIs need to be at least break even or better, and the success score has to be 6.8 or higher. And then then I set the parameters for the negative ones as well. So when we go back to the PPs. The angle for the up in class wasn't 6.8 or higher, so that's why it's not highlighted as positive angle. I just want people to know that's how you control how it's neutral or green or red, the way the angles are highlighted when you look at them on the list. And then the other horse that I like in this race is the Pesa. And if front runners were doing better on this track, I would be really high on this horse, but I think it's going to be a slow pace, and the True Odds predicts it being a slow pace, so I still give her a shot. A couple of the good angles here is Joe Bravo riding in graded turf route stakes, so that's a strong angle. And then also this angle where you have a horse gets their highest last race Equibase speed figure, and it's higher than the class rating. The highest last race speed figure for all the horses in the race. So if you're looking at everyone's last race, this one had the highest speed figure of those, and it's higher than today's class rating. So that's not a highly profitable angle. The success score is high, 8.1. I'll click on it real quick. But the ROI is negative 16, but that's still so it's still a positive aspect because the 1% is so high at 31%. It's just they are always getting bet. So you know, random betting is going to be minus 25%. So anytime angles get, you know, in the minus 12 to minus 16% range, and they have high win percentages, I still want to know about them because that is a positive sign. So that's quickly the two horses that I like in this race.
That's the ladies' turf. The grade 3 starts the stake sequence on Saturday. Let's turn Ellis or Craig. You can stay with us and
sure. Yeah.
press into the ladies' sprint, 6.5.
Yeah, so I'll jump into this race, and my top choice is number 6, Morticia. This one has, like I said, you know, at least one of the angles is positive when we have the green one. And the reason we have it that way is because, you know, when someone has some type of positive angle, they always want to know about it. So we have that have priority, and that's why those show, even though that it has some negative angles as well. And so this is just the George Arnold. Like we talked about, trainers that have good angles or good angles at Kentucky Downs. So he had a good meet last year. I don't know if he had any horses today. I didn't check, but I know yesterday he had one that I know didn't win. But this is, the angles are always updating. So when his horses run during the night, everything gets updated. So when you're checking later that night or early the next morning, everything's up to date. So you know that these angles, all these statistics are up to date. So you know if he's still doing well or not. So this is over the last 365 days. That's what the 1 year always means. Out of 10 starters, he had 3 winners and a very high ROI. Just in general, he has a positive angle with turf sprints, so positive 32% ROI. And when we look at the true odds, we see that one of the things I look at is I sort on the true odds, and Morticia has highlighted in yellow. So the adjusted true odds are 4-1, and before the live odds come in, we just compare this to the morning line odds. So we're highlighting possible overlays. So Lowell and Morticia fall in this category, and that's why they're highlighted in yellow. So that's the other thing that I like about Morticia. My second choice is Hull. Lowell, I mean, one second. So this source has a couple of angles that aren't, it's like we talked about, they're not profitable, but we see these angles that Brian Joseph Fernandez Jr. riding at Kentucky Downs is only minus 5% ROI. And then Christophe Clement and turf sprints overall is minus 9%. So, I mean, those are easily beating the minus 25% of random betting. So those are positive aspects. And as we looked at on the true odds, the horse was top rated. So that's why I liked that horse as well. One other angle was there's a way to set the angles here that are in orange. This is called the summary research angles. So that'll, when Ellis showed the summary research and the individual research earlier, the summary research always matches for this is for the trainer, for the jockey, the dam, and the sire. On the PPs will always match if you go into the summary research. So for Christophe Clement, for this one's for the way that I have my default set up for the last 3 years in turf sprints and these non-graded type stakes. He's had 38 starters with 24% winners, 61% in the money, and almost break even, negative 1% ROI. And then the last horse that I just want to talk about quickly is Mississippi Delta. And this horse is 1-for-1 at Kentucky Downs, 2-for-2 at the distance, and in the true odds. This horse was also ranked at the top with Lowell. And so the only reason it's not highlighted is because it's right at the break-even point. So if the live odds were to go up to 7-2 or 4-1, then this horse could, if everything being equal, if it still was 3-1 adjusted odds, then this horse would become highlighted as well, because the live odds take over once they start coming in. So now I can pass it off to Ellis. Should have it now, Ellis.
All right. So it's interesting. I would say, first of all, that Craig's picks are sound, Morticia, Lowell. But the problem is I don't like the running style right now. And they could certainly run well switching to this race. But, I'm not going to talk people off them. They just weren't for me. I like them on every level. If this was a total race on the flat, Saratoga, Churchill, someplace else, I mean, I'm really got a crush on Morticia because she just makes money. She just is a good horse to use. Every time she runs, she does little wrong. La Colonel's the only one that really beat her, especially when she goes left for the mile. Lowell also, just certainly very competitive. The last couple of races have been solid. That San Clemente was, very tough race, went very fast in that race. Certainly can use him, but I'm looking elsewhere. And I'm going to start, first of all, by talking about the pace. And I know Craig did a little bit, talked about the true odds, but I'm going to talk about the projector here. And I use this as sometimes a starting point to be lazy. I'll be honest. I mean, I could look at every horse and write the ones that won, from, I call it a picket fence, that have ones from right to left. The races they won, I go back from right to left. And if, most of their races are ones, their last few races are ones, the first few calls, and those are the early horses, and there's 2 or 3 of them, I go looking for the pressers and the closers. In this case, I could just sort on running style, and there it is for me. Lull, Morticia, Scattergun, Navy, Mississippi Delta, and Sea Cloud. Well, the interesting horse here is Scattergun because she's going to be the one, I just unfortunately hit the wrong button here, she's going to be the one that is going to really determine how the rest of the race is going to be run, because she's the horse, I think, no matter how good or bad she is, I mean, the fact that she may not have the quality of some of these, the fact is she is determined to have lead. If you look at the way she runs here, and she runs out to a 3-length lead, a length and a half early, no matter what kind of race, and really big pace figures here, she's going to dictate. And that's going to put Lowell and Morticia in a stalking position, which may work out well for them. Or they could be up too close to a fast pace. Look, if they're sitting 1 or 2 lengths off of 47 at Kentucky Downs, they're going to be dead meat for the closers here. So I'm going to start with a horse I think is going to benefit the most from that, and that's going to be the 10, Happy Mesa. Happy Mesa has the right running style for the race, particularly if I go back 3 here to their Hilltop race on the Black-Eyed Susan Day, where she came from 16 back to win Going Away, Castellano rode her before that. She ran second in the Sanibel Island to a decent horse in Conquest Hard Candy. That was her second start of the year, so I'll give her first start of the year. That was Dream Dancing anyway, which is, she's a tough horse. Then she came back. She trains trainers. She went to the Maker Barn. Her first race for Maker was just pretty bad, but I see she got the 10-post. Second time out, oh, look, she gets the 10-post again. The 10-post in a 2-turn race like at Arlington, Indiana, is much different than 10-post at Kentucky Downs. This 6.5 furlong trip at Kentucky Downs, the 10-post won't mean a thing because she'll be clear. She can get in the 3 and 4 path. And if she runs back to this race with the 103 Equibase speed figure, especially on the cutback here from 9 furlongs to 6.5, she can do a lot of damage here opening at 15-1. She gets one of the hot jockeys. She gets the trainer who's not hot, who's just always good at the meeting, and she's got the figures to compete here. So I'm going to say right now I'm looking at Happy Mesa as my top pick. After that, something I called an uncoupled entry, which I use a lot since in a lot of graded stakes now we don't have coupled entries anymore. This is different owners. The 3 Corby, who's trained by Brendan Walsh, and the 7 Sea Cloud. Now, Corby's a need the lead type, but he did come from off the pace 3 back under Joe Rocco, so I imagine if Rocco reads the PPs, he's going to see that he's going to have to take this horse back, even back to here where he took the horse back to 9th, so that's okay. He opens at a big price for a guy that's a solid trainer, and Corby, her last 3 races have been the best of her career, 102, 102, and 104, so I promise I'm not leaving her off my ticket. She does run second a lot more than first, 1 win, 6 seconds, but Walsh is a sharp guy. I'm not going to discount what he's doing here. And then the other one is the 7 Sea Cloud, who I like a little better, but, it's a matter of volume. Here you get 30-1 on a horse who's very interesting here. The Sea Cloud ran at Keeneland in April. She ran second in an allowance race, came back and won by a neck with a 105, came back at Churchill here. These are all dirt races. You go back, you look at her 2 turf races, she was 9th and 7th. But what I happened to notice was it here, yes, that the dam has 2 foals on the turf with 14 starters. Well, we know this is one of them, and the other one's got 3 wins. So I'm not too worried about it. Maybe she's just a different horse now later in the year, but she's certainly in good form, and you get a big price here. And talking about Walsh, people that haven't heard of him, I know you have, Steve, and Craig probably as well. A lot of people have, but here's a guy, past 2 years, dirt to turf sprints. I'm going to take off the dirt to turf because that's not my angle here. I just want to know how the guy does on turf. So I'm just going to switch it to turf, and I'm going to do sprints. And just for the heck of it, then I'm going to change it to stakes because I want to see a couple things. So first of all, turf sprints, past 2 years, Brendan Walsh, 12 for 66, a plus 46 ROI. Well, that's pretty sweet. And just for the heck of it, I want to see maybe how good he is with better quality horses. And I think that's going to be a no-brainer. So you can just check. You can do all stakes or graded stakes. This is like a graded stake, but I'm going to do all stakes here. And we're going to go all stakes with Brendan Walsh and do it. Just apply it here really quick. And you're going to see a really nice number here. 3 for 12 with 7 horses, 163% ROI. We can sort here. We can see one each year. This guy knows what he's doing. And you got a 30-to-1 shot here who, according to at least the speed figures and the way the track is playing, as well as the style, if all the pace sets up on the 7 Sea Cloud here, can make a nice run from just off the pace here. So I'm looking at 3 nice prices here. I'm certainly going to use 2 Fairpoint, who's one of the favorites, who ran a really big race here in the Crest and kind of bounced in the Smart and Fancy, regressed, so to speak, but did win the Ken Matty down the hill at Santa Anita, had a really good run here. I'm going to use the one Mississippi Delta, the other favorite. They're not vulnerable like the Simple City, in my opinion. He's got a big race here. She in the Intercontinental, but I got to tell you, it's the truth, Steve, and people listening. If the odds hold up, I'm making 3 win bets here. I'm betting Happy Mesa, Corby, and Sea Cloud, and I'm just betting Brendan Walsh on those 2 because I know he's a sharp guy.
Well, and when it comes to people like Brendan Walsh and somebody like Jonathan Shepard, who has shipped in there successfully over the years, Tom Voss came there successfully as well during his great career. Graham Motion. These are Europeans, European style trainers, or in the case of Voss and Shepard, steeplechase trainers that understand horses that can navigate up and down undulating surfaces. And so there's a little bit of extra interest. I agree when it comes to certain horsemen that can identify the kind of horse that has endurance. One of the things to take into consideration, I talked about this on the show the other day, when it comes to these 6.5 furlong races, very much like we talk about down the hill at Santa Anita, horses that are cutting back from 7 furlongs or a mile, even a mile and a 16th, that plays very well on these kinds of courses, horses that are used to going further than the typical turf sprint distance. And typically when we go down the hill at Santa Anita, you're talking about horses, in some cases, stretching out from 5, 5.5 to 6.5. They're at a disadvantage than the ones that are cutting back that have a little bit of extra wind. And generally, these kinds of courses lend themselves well to those kinds of horses. So just an aside, let's press forward and Ellis, pick up the ball and talk about the other turf sprint. This is the 9th.
Yeah, it's a really good race. Grade 3 now, the Kentucky Down Turf Sprint, a $400,000 purse, and we've got a great field of 11 here. I'm going to start with the 6 Wyeth here. Wyeth, a very interesting horse trained by Tom Amos. We're looking at a turf race here, and for those that don't know, you can filter. I've got every running line here, but you can turn on a filter to only look at today's surface, so only the turf races, but I'll just go down to them. So not bad. The horse ran a stake here, ran 5th and 4th and 3rd, beaten a neck and a head and a head here to a next out winner on the Poly at Arlington, which is similar to turf, and then the Muddy Keeneland he actually won. But I'm looking at these turf races back here, and when he switched barns from Chad Brown, Tom Amos, of course, Chad Brown, fantastic, had him in good form, went from September to December, 3rd here. He was 2nd here, beaten a neck, but disqualified. And then this nice win is 5.5. And these two races with these 2 numbers, the 112 and 107, and the 112 is the highest speed figure for the horse. That's a race I think he can run back to. You're looking at 8-1. You're looking at Drayden Van Dyke, who's just a really good jockey. Doesn't get a lot of mounts in the East Coast, but Tom Proctor, of course, uses him like clockwork, and now Tom Amos. And I think Wyeth, if you draw a line through the last couple, even draw a line through all 4, if you're looking for his turf sprints, there they are. They jump off the page at me, and I'll look at Wyeth here as a top pick. Commend would be another horse I'm strongly looking at here, 4-1. It does have an angle here, which is a Mott from stakes to allowance, which doesn't come up. He's got a 0 for 1. I can't remember. I set it up a long time ago because I thought when Mott was confident I was going to take a look, and I'm going to remind myself on the fly here what that was. 7 times in the last year, Mott's gone from stakes to allowance. No wins, 1 second, 1 third. But that's not going to get me off the horse, by the way, even though it's not that great, because I think Command fits on a lot of their angles. Again, a horse who's just improving by leaps and bounds here. October to April, needed a race, and then he won at Belmont with Jose Ortiz. He ran 4th in the Highlander Stakes, shipped up to Canada against Green Mass, who came back to win again. And then he went back to New York, and he won again with Ortiz. So Jose's in to ride him here. This is a nice improving pattern of Equibase speed figures for this horse, who I believe, I put it, he's a 4-year-old, so he's still not fully mature, could improve some more. He's 4 to 1, but that's a nice price on him. The next, you can't leave out a horse like Hoagie. His record really speaks for itself here. 16 wins, 11 seconds. 27 for 44. On the turf, he's 13 for 19. He just missed the neck here to Big Rock in this allowance optional favor to stay in the condition, and he was taken. First time he was in for a claiming price forever, and they probably thought he was safe. And Mike Maker says, I don't care. You got to hear a horse that's 8 years old who's made almost $1 million. I think I can get a couple more years out of him. And Maker picks him up for $80,000, 6-minute race. Of course, with the winner's share is $240, so he can triple up. For his new owner, one of his main owners, Michael Huey, if I'm saying that right, forgive me, Michael. But Michael claimed him for it, and certainly very consistent speed figures, and he runs off the pace. He's got a great style. He ran 2nd here at Kentucky Downs. It was last year, actually. He ran 2nd in this race, beating the neck at 15 to 1, and he's 5 to 2 here, so it might not be a great win bet in a deep field. And then the 7 is undrafted. The horse we talked about that won that race at Arlington, Crewman, who is number 8 here, who we just looked at. Crewman loves to go to the lead and goes really, really fast, even a mile and 3/16 to mile 11/16. And I think Crewman's going to get into a little bit of a battle here with Tell All You Know, who is the 4 horse. And again, I looked at the pace projector first to see what this was going to look like. But look at all these 1s and 2s early. These 2 horses are going to battle even on slow fractions. Katie Clausen's a fairly new jockey. She doesn't really rate horses as well as she will when she gets a lot of races under her belt and is more of a journeyman. So she can run well, and I think that's going to set up undrafted really nicely here, because you look back at this race at Keeneland, which I'll actually show for those that don't recall. This is a race in which when he was running in the race, Garcia rides him today, but it was Joe Rosario put the horse out in the middle of the track. I'm just going to kind of skip here, and you're going to see a blur on the outside in the stretch with undrafted, which wears those WW colors of Wesley Ward. He's still even not in the picture in this race. He's the rail horse. He's way back here, and he's going to just come flying from, you can see that's the 8th pole. He's just crossing right now. He's 7 back, and he's just going to gobble up the ground now. He hasn't run well since, but if he runs back to that race, and I'm a guy that believes horses can do that kind of thing, you can see that he's going to be very, very tough in this situation. So my picks in the race are the 6 Wyeth, the 1 Command, the 10 Hoagie, and the 7 undrafted. And I'm going to play an exact and trifecta box here. And those are my plays, and I'm going to turn it over to Craig and let him have at it here. You got it, Craig?
Okay, yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. So I have a couple of horses that overlap with Ellis's contenders and one other one that wasn't on his radar. So Command, Ellis mentioned all the things that I like. The one thing, as Ellis said, this horse ran the 110 Equibase speed figure last race. You can always tell up here when you look at the lifetime record, this number here will always show the highest Equibase speed figure that the horse has in its career, and it'll put the year that it ran it. So if even if the PP wasn't here, if it had done something in 2015, it would show 2015, and if it had run a 110 before, that's what would show there. So the first time that it ever runs that high in number is what's displayed there. So that's one way to always gauge where a horse is in his career, the kind of speed figures he's running. And like Ellis pointed out, as a 4-year-old, there's still room for improvement. So this horse is also the top pick in the true odds and the adjusted true odds, and for all the reasons Ellis said, that's why I like the horse. One other horse that I like is this Bondurant. He's a 7-2, and it's just a couple angle plays. This one, earlier we had seen a horse going up in class rating. This one is Ian Wilkes going down in class. It's a positive 35% ROI for this horse. And then, how we had mentioned before, Brian Joseph Hernandez Jr. had done well at Kentucky Downs last meet, so I'm still sticking with him on this meet so far. So that's why I like that horse. And then also, if we look again at the number 10, Hoagie, that Ellis talked about. One other thing is, last year Kentucky Downs, Florent Giroux had an outstanding meet. His numbers were 8.0 success score and a +6% ROI at Kentucky Downs if you go over the last 365 days. And the other thing I liked about Hoagie is when you look at the class rating here of 110, that's always, the class ratings are based on what the expected Equibase speed figure will be for the winner of today's race. So when you look at the horse's speed figures, 109, 110, 113, 122, I mean, all those are, within the 110 easily and better even. So this horse is going to be very, very tough to beat, even as an 8-year-old. So that's all I really have to say about this race. We can move on to the 10th.
The 10th is the Turf Cup, the Kentucky Turf Cup, and of course that harkens back. Ellis, you'll appreciate those days when Turfway had the September dates, not Churchill, and we had the Kentucky Cup races, including a very famous confrontation between Hard Spun and Street Sense 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was a great race. On the Derby just a few weeks later, and now they're going to bring back the Kentucky Cup next spring for the Polytrack, but we have this fantastic turf stake here with a $600,000 person. I'll let Craig finish because he has control. He'll go over his picks, and then we'll switch to me to finish.
Yeah, so in this race, this is kind of my bet of the day, I guess. This number 3, Mook Tissur. He is making a major step up in class, but the things I like about him is, on the angles, Joe Bravo riding in graded turf route stakes. Just bring this one up. Take a quick look. So out of 22 starters, he has 27% win percent, 7.8 success score, 94% ROI. And like I said in previous webinars, I like to try to get in on, and kind of like even what Steve mentioned about the first crop sires, I'm trying to spot trends early, or spot trends even when the number of starts might be 10, 20, 30. Because Race Lens is always keeping track of everything for you, updating it every day, you can see when it starts to go cold or if it doesn't pan out. But I like to be on these types of trends. Also for this horse, one of the angles that is part of Ellis's angles is Kieran McLaughlin, starters on turf. When we click on this, you'll see that out of 130 starters, 21% win percent, 7.2 success score, and it's positive +6 ROI. I just want to quickly show people, if you go to the Manage Search Angle screen, when you come in with race lens, there are some angles that we already have. So on the left-hand side will be, these are angles from Lafitte Pinkai that he had come up with. We also have ones from Ellis, Starr. So you can see the ones on this side I haven't activated that are on the left-hand side of the screen, deactivated angles, but some of the other ones Ellis has have been activated. So you just use these buttons to activate or deactivate angles, and the activated angles, the ones on the right, are the ones that are going to show up when you're looking in the PPs or on your home screen. So I just wanted people to know that's how you can activate angles, and there's other angles from the stats team. So that's basically how those work. And then any one that you create, because you can use this create new angle button, they're going to show up with your source name here. And you can always filter them by if you just want to see your angles, you can just use the filter there to get to those. So I just want to let people know, we wanted to point out some things with angles in this webinar. And then the other thing about this horse is, if you look back in his 3-year-old season, you can see they ran this horse at 1.25 miles on the turf, 1.5 miles. So they always thought this horse, I think, early on was going to be, a long distance runner. Today's race is 1.5 miles. They gelded him, came to America. He ran okay when they tried him on dirt. This turf race was good, and then this race came off the turf and he won, but it was in the slop. So I think they wanted to try him on dirt. They thought maybe they had something. He ran 2 poor races on the Aqueduct Inner, but now that they've put him back on the turf, these last 2 races you see are 11 furlongs, and the horse has responded well. And Joe Bravo has been on for the last 3 starts, and this horse, it just looks to be improving, and I think he's going to take to the 1.5 miles. So the only thing is, this horse is kind of a grinder, so I probably not going to be as high as it could be if he had more of a turn of foot where he could get out of trouble. You could sometimes play a little bit more money on that type of horse, but as far as on the win end, but I think this horse is going to be right there, and I like the way that he's coming into the race. The other race that looks to be on the improve, the other horse to be on the improve is number 1, and that's Postulation. And this horse, as we see, this horse was running Equibase speed figures 96, 107, 104, 96, and all of a sudden he comes up with these big figures of 116 and 115, and you can see that the race 3 back he added blinkers, so it looks like it maybe took a race, but the addition of blinkers has really had this horse improve. He never looked threatened that last race, beating Taglib, so this horse is another one that looks to be on the improve that I like a lot. And then the third horse that is still dangerous to me. It's the top pick on the adjusted true odds. The one negative I would say is, since it is 6 years old, this 115 was the best speed figure it ever earned, so possibly it could bounce. It did go off huge odds that day, which I'm not sure why it went off so big, because it has competed before in graded races. It's won grade 3s, grade 2s, but this horse is, I can't leave this horse completely out of the mix for me, and so he would be in my exactas and trifectas, and that's the way that I'm looking at this race. I can pass it off to Ellis now. There you go, Ellis.
All right, winding down. It's a great race. No question. I think it's a very bettable race, and we're all looking for races that are more playable, because I think the favorites have a little bit to be desired here. Craig mentioned enterprising a little bit. He's the 3-1 morning line favorite. He's coming out of a grade 1, so I could see why 2 of his last 3. But I am not enamored of this horse even one bit. He hasn't run at Kentucky Downs. Lannery, I'd rather see Gaffalione. Lannery's a great jockey, but he's not as good on the course. The last 3 races, he just didn't finish up here. He was a little tight. I'm going to take a stand against Enterprising. I'm going to use the second running line favorite, Oscar Nominated, and second only, which really opens up the race for me because when you look at Oscar Nominated, 3 for 10 last year, 0 for 6 this year. And I don't see a lot of excuses here. He's also going to be bet because he's dropping out of the Grade 1. I want horses in form, and I think the best horse in form are going to be the 1-2 finishers, particularly the second finisher, Taglib, coming out of the American St. Ledger on the same day. He's cutting back, believe it or not, 1 11/16 to 1 8/16, a mile and a half, off a nice close from 8th to 2nd. He was just too late. Jose Ortiz is going to ride him back, which says a lot to me. He was second in the Man of War. I think this is a really nice marathoner. He's 1 for 3. He won at a mile and a half back here when he won the McKnight in January at Gulfstream. So we know he can get a mile and a half. Very consistent figures with the one absence here. A pretty bad race in the Belmont Gold Cup, even though in the Arlington Handicap he ran 5th. That might have just been a prep to get him used to the course because he hadn't been over it before. But he opens at 5, and that's, again, for Mike Maker, who has 4 in the race. So you got to tread a little lightly, be careful with which Maker horses you might like better. Then I'm going to go to a bomber on the outside in the 12, Nessie. This is a really interesting horse, a long shot special. Javier Castellano rode the horse last time out, so that was a really good race in the John's Call. 1 5/8 gets beat a length, a length and a quarter. It was a shorter field, but it was the trip. He's run a mile and a half before here. He won 2 before that at Churchill. Been all over the place here. Then didn't do much in this mile and 3/8 at Saratoga. But when he's in a mood and he gets Hernandez, Wilkes has already won 1 race each, I believe, or more on the first 2 days of the meeting here. And I just can't see this horse at 20-1 based on that John's Call effort here for Nessie. So I'm going to use Nessie. Bullard's Alley, it's a horse I normally would be taking a stand against. But, again, I'm looking back for marathoners. Didn't run a thing here, but had some trouble. You could see the triangle, which means he had some trouble in the American St. Leger. Before that, the Singspiel makes a nice rally here from 5th at the quarter pole to lead at the 8th pole, gets beat neck to a multiple $1 million winner in all the snow. And that's a race I think he can run back to as well. And he's 12 on morning line. That's great odds when you get these huge fields here. And then Postulation, who won the American St. Leger, who Craig talked about, St. Leger, I should say. Craig talked about a horse that just all of a sudden for Eddie Graham was a nice horse, but really good. Back-to-back stakes wins, 116 and 115. He's not losing a trip, not losing an edge right now. Vargas rode him very well. He's going to get the roll back. And I will use Muktasir. Craig's, of course, I'm not taking a stand against him. But I am going to be very kind of cheeky about how I play the race. I'm going to play Taglib and Nessie to win, and Nessie probably win in place. And I'm going to box Taglib and Nessie, Bullard's Alley, and Postulation, and Muktasir in a 5-horse exacta box. I hope to get one of the double-digit horses in there, and I might put Oscar Nominated in 2nd and 3rd if I play some trifectas. But that's how I'm closing out the card here, Steve.
Well, the only thing I'll bring up, and I have not looked at this all that hard, but I am surprised that neither of you have got a comment for Oscar Nominated and what he offers here. I mean, coming out of a deceptively interesting performance in the Arlington Million. I mean, if we're talking company, isn't he the most interesting? And he did win the 3-year-old race here last year.
Yeah, no, I'm going to use him in 2nd and 3rd. I'm concerned about what the recent form has taken as far as mentally on him, because he had the big year last year with the 3 wins and 3 seconds, including the win here, which you're referring to right here, the Derby, which he won by 6, and he was beaten a length in the Secretariat before that. But these last couple running lines are just weak for me. He makes a move here in the Woodford Reserve and gets tired. That was a little wet, but then it's 3 races in a row, and that's why I'm not going to make a win contender. I'm definitely going to use him in 2nd and 3rd. It's interesting because he is 7-2 on the morning line, as you pointed out, and both he and the horse just outside of, not outside the Enterprising, the 7, is also coming out of the Arlington Million. He's the 3-1 morning line favorite. I think he's a bad favorite, and Oscar Nominated is not a bad favorite, but I think it's an opportunity to take a stand against him. But I'm not as a win contender. But I'm certainly not leaving him off my exacta trifecta tickets in second and third. If he beats me, I will, hats off to you and anybody else that plays him, because he does have races to reach back to that can certainly win this race.
Yeah, I like Leparoux. I like Maker connecting with Leparoux here, who at least has ridden him before, and his tendency is, especially on this course, he's got a good feel. He's already having these first 2 days. I'm hard pressed to ignore him, and I don't think he's gone forward as a 4-year-old much, but he certainly compared to what is a field of, I don't want to call them marginal stake horses. He does have a class about him. I don't have any problem going against Enterprising, who to me is kind of living on borrowed time. I mean, this is a horse that was sold privately by Glenn Hill, and it's quite something. Maker has really held him together and has gotten outlandish success out of him because there were indications that it was a couple of ticks past midnight for Enterprising. So that I'm impressed, but I think there's still some upside on Oscar Nominated, and of course looking forward to his brother too, Oscar Performance, running back. Talked to Brian Lynch yesterday, and Lynchy is going to send the 3-year-old out against Elders in the Joe Hirsch, looking toward a possible Breeders' Cup turf start. Well, there's your Kentucky Downs lineup, and it's a good one. How about a quick thought, fellas, for the turf race down in Bossier City, Louisiana Downs, and Super Derby taking the same path as the Lone Star Park Derby and going over and taking advantage of all the 3-year-olds that want to run on grass.
Well, absolutely, and that's our Equibase race of the week. Let me switch out to it real quick. So I'll go through it quickly. My detailed analysis is free under the Equibase race of the week, and those that are signed up for our newsletter here, I'm trying to get this to switch back to having trouble for some reason here to get it to switch back to super down. But I'll start talking about horses here. The horses that are the local horses in the race, Misunderstood and Fast Talking Man, which I'm going to go to right now. Find Louisiana Downs. There it is. I like the fact they went to turf, by the way, on this race. It's interesting. That's race number 11 on the card. And so Fast Talking Man and Misunderstood just ran first and second. The Prelude, they opened at 8-1, and at number 4, Misunderstood, opens at 9-5. I don't think they're fast enough, so I'm going to take a shot against them. I like the 6 Fat Man here, and he was overmatched in the West Virginia Derby on the dirt, but he won the Long Ranch before that with a career best number. He's got turf races here, scratched by the trainer, scratched because he was MTO for some reason. But back here on the turf, he ran second in a little race here earlier, and then he started out his career on turf at 5.5. I think he's kind of interesting here. The 105 figure is the best figure earned by any horse in the race on turf or dirt, and he was proven capable. Now, we talked at the beginning of the show, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Steve, about sires. Because of the fact that his turf record is 0-1-0-3, and most of his running and good races have been on the dirt, I wanted to remind myself what Munnings. So if I look at the past 5 years, first of all, turf routes of Munnings, it's not bad, 12% wins, a -1 ROI. But I want to see how good his horses do in better races. So I went and did turf, and I took off routes because I want to see everything, and I switched to stakes. Now I can come back and narrow it down, but I know I'm going to get a smaller sample if I do that. And I'm going to look at Sons and Daughters of Munnings in all stakes races on the turf going back 5 years. And I was actually pretty impressed by this on a fairly small sample of 43 starts from 15 horses, 7 wins, 47% in the money, and a 52% ROI with a median win price of $12.80. And, of course, I can sort on the winners here. You can see some of it was Free Rose, who was a really nice horse, by the way, won a couple of stakes last year at Del Mar. And Free Rose is a full brother to Fat Man here, because Munning's out of, oh no, I'm sorry, not a full, a half, but ran very well. And you'll see he ran second in the Twilight Derby, won the Del Mar Derby and the La Jolla. But there's another name here that jumps off the page that everybody would know, and that would be Ohm. So when I think about Munnings not having a lot of horses that have run on the turf, back to the stat of only 15 horses, but they have 2 horses that have won multiple graded stakes here. And Fat Man coming in under the radar here at 8-1 because he hasn't run much on the turf and his turf races don't look like much. I think that's where I'm taking a shot here. I'm going to use Fat Man. I'm going to use Sonitor, who I've been liked the whole year. They were confident with him, went for the Triple Crown races. Of course, he ran second, and luckily, I tabbed him in iAnalysis at the Rebel, so we got some nice exactas for those folks that got that free analysis, just like the race of the week today. Then he went back to the maiden ranks, and his first turf race back in the maiden ranks, he won by a nose. Kent DeSormo stays elsewhere. Milan Sunrise, which is fine for DeSormo. He opens up at 2-1, so not a great price. And I'll use Gorgeous Kitten in my exactas and trifectas because he runs okay. He ran second in the American Derby, then he, again, coming out of the Grade 1 Secretariat. But my top pick here is going to be Fat Man in the race. And Craig, I don't know if you need me to switch back to you or not, or I can just do it for you.
Why don't you switch back real quick? I mean, I'm just going to take a minute or two, but it'll just be easier.
Okay. All right. It's yours.
So just looking at the True Odds screen, we can see that I just sorted the horses by adjusted True Odds, and the 2 that are highlighted as possible overlays are the 2 horses I'm going to play. So number 2, Gorgeous Kitten, and number 1, Fast Talking Man. There isn't a lot of speed in the race. I mean, the number 3, Flying Honeypot, is the only one with an early designation. As far as the race projection, the stats, Quant's team, they came up with algorithms to try to determine how the race is going to unfold. It does a very good job. I mean, I look at it every time, and many times when I thought they'd be wrong, they're right. So I've come to respect their algorithms. And this race looks like, the 4 or the 2 will get the lead on the 3, or else they're going to be tracking behind the 3. Let's just say because the 3 is early speed. So I do think that Gorgeous Kitten and Mr. Misunderstood, if they don't battle each other, I mean, they're going to be tough to beat. But I think Gorgeous Kitten is the better of the 2. When I go look at the PPs, the last race, when you look at the speed figure earned by Gorgeous Kitten, the 102 is much faster than any of the other horses had in their last race. So it looks like just to be the fastest, and in the current form that it's on. The main reason I like Fast Talking Man is because of the odds, is the price you get, and there are a couple of nice angles. So the trainer, Danny Pish, in turf routes is a positive 9%, and the jockey, Luis Esquinone, is riding in turf routes is positive 22% ROI. So those 2 angles, along with it being highlighted in on the True Odds screen, and there's also, just so you know, there's always these individual research calculations down here, statistics, and there's a good one for the trainer, Danny Pish, that's 23% with a positive 11% ROI, and it's just over the last 5 years, when it's the 3rd race off a layoff for a horse that's 3 years or older in a turf route, they do very well. So I like that short-term and long-term statistics are matching up for this horse, and so I think he can be coming at the end and can run 1st or 2nd there, depending on how the pace works out. And that's how I see that race.
Well, another weekend to test all your handicapping skills, and of course, utilizing Stats Race Lens really at your disposal to maximize the opportunities. A reminder about the subscription opportunity: you buy 1 month if you're a new customer. You buy 1 month, you get 2 months free, which means you're going to get all September, October, and November right through Thanksgiving, and perfect timing in terms of all the action leading up and through Breeders' Cup, and then plenty of good action in November, like Holiday Fest in New York and the Delta Jackpot and more. So take advantage of this. The expiration date to take advantage is the end of the month. You use the promo code WEBINAR, WEBINAR, and you get all the other benefits, including access to the Equibase and Trackmaster PPs. You get to utilize the forum right here, ask questions, and people like Craig and Ellis interact with you and help you understand and develop your own angles and utilize the ones that are right built into Stats Race Lens. The summer was just tremendous. We appreciate everybody taking advantage of our conversations. We're going to get together again in a few weeks. We've got a lot of great webinar opportunities with all the big races, the Win in Your Ins and Churchill opening next week. And then, of course, you got the big racing at Santa Anita and Belmont coming up. Keeneland's not far off. So stay with us. Anything we can do to help, let us know. Follow Stats Race Lens on Twitter. And we'll wish you all good luck at Kentucky Downs and Louisiana Downs this weekend. And we'll talk soon.